Okay, so good day everyone. Our topic for today is about on how to craft or create theoretical framework. Theories are formulated to explain, predict, and understand phenomena, and in many cases to challenge and extend existing knowledge within the limit of critical bounding assumptions. The theoretical framework is the structure that can hold or support a theory or a research study. The theoretical framework introduce and describe the theory that explain why the research problem under study exists. So what is the importance of a theory or theoretical framework? A theoretical framework consists of concepts and together with their definitions and reference to relevant scholarly literature, existing theory that is used for your particular study. The theoretical framework must demonstrate an understanding of theories and concepts that are relevant to the topic of your research paper and that relate to the broader areas of knowledge being considered. The theoretical framework is most often not something readily found within the literature. You must review course readiness and pertinent research studies for theories and analytic models that are relevant to the research problem you are investigating. The selection of a theory should depend on its appropriateness, ease of application, and explanatory power. The theoretical framework strengthens the study in the following ways. Okay, so explicit statement of theoretical assumptions permits the reader to evaluate them critically. The theoretical framework connects the researcher to existing knowledge. Guided by a relevant theory, you are given a basis for your hypothesis in choice of research methods. Articulating the theoretical assumptions of a research study forces you to address questions of why and how. It permits you to intellectually transition from simply describing a phenomenon you have observed to generalizing about various aspects of that phenomenon. Having a theory helps you identify the limits to those generalizations because a theoretical framework specifies which key variables influence a phenomenon of interest and highlights the need to examine how those key variables might differ and under what circumstances. By virtue of its applicative nature, good theory in the social science is of value precisely because it fulfills one primary purpose: to explain the meaning, nature, and challenges associated with the phenomenon, often experienced but unexplained in the world in which we live, so that we may use that knowledge and understanding to act in more informed and effective ways. Strategies for developing the theoretical framework. So developing the framework, here are some strategies to develop an effective theoretical framework. Number one, the research problem anchors your entire study and forms the basis from which you construct your theoretical framework. So number two, brainstorm about your considered to be the key variables in your research. Answer the question, what factors contribute to the presumed effect? Number three, review related literature to find how scholars have addressed your research problem. Identify the assumptions from which the authors address the problem. Next will be list the construct and variables that might be relevant to your study. Group these variables into independent and dependent categories. Review key social theories that are introduced to you in your course reading and choose the theory that can best explain the relationship between the key variables in your study, and discuss the assumptions of preposition of this theory and point out their relevance to your research. A theoretical framework is used to limit the scope of the relevant data. So by focusing on the specific variables and defining the specific viewpoint that the researcher will take in analyzing and interpreting the data, to be gathered. So it also facilitates the understanding of concept and variables according to given definitions and build new knowledge by validating and challenging theoretical assumptions. So the purpose, of course, is think of theories as the conceptual basis for understanding, analyzing, and designing ways to investigate relationship within social systems. To that, the following rules say by theory can help guide the development of your framework. So, what will be the purpose of the theoretical framework? So, as what we have here, means by which new research data can be interpreted and coded for for future use. Response to new problems that have new previously in the identified solution strategy, means of identifying and defining research problem, means for prescribing or evaluating solutions to research problems, ways of discerning certain facts among the accumulated knowledge that are important and which facts are not, means by which identify important new issues and prescribe the most critical research, means of giving all data new interpretations and new meaning, means of providing members of professional discipline with a common language and frame of reference by defining the boundaries of their profession, and mean of to guide and inform research so that it can be in turn guide research efforts and improve professional practice, as stated by Torraco RJ, a theory building research method. Structure and writing style. Theoretical framework may be rooted in the specific theory, in which case your work is expected to test the validity of that existing theory in relation to specific events, issues, or phenomena. Many social science research papers fit into this rubric. However, you may not always be asked by your professor to test a specific theory in your paper, but to develop your own framework from which your analysis of the research problem is derived. It is perhaps easiest to understand the nature and functions of theoretical framework if it is viewed as an answer to two basic questions. And of course, the first one is, what is the research problem question? So it means to say that how should the individual in the state relate during period of conflict? So why is your approach a feasible solution? So justify the application of your choice of a particular theory and explain why alternative constructs were rejected. So the answer to these questions come from a thorough review of the literature in your course readings. And of course, the gaps in research that emerge from the review process. With this in mind, a complete theoretical framework will likely not emerge until after you have completed a thorough review of the related literature. So just as a research problem in your paper requires contextualization and background information, a theory requires a framework for understanding its application to the topic being investigated. So when writing and revising this part of your research paper, keep in mind of the following. Okay, so clearly describe the framework, concept, models, or specific theories and underpin your study. This include noting who the key theorists are in the field who have conducted research on the problem who you are investigating, and when necessary, the historical context that supports the formulation of the theory. This latter element is particularly important if the theory is relatively unknown or it is borrowed from another discipline. Position your theoretical framework within a broader context of related frameworks, concept, models, or theories. As noted in this example, in some example, there will likely be several concepts, theories, or models that can be used to help develop a framework for understanding the research problem. Therefore, note why the theory you've chosen is appropriate one. The present tense is used when writing about theory. Although the past tense can be used to describe the history of a theory or the role of key theories, the construction of your theoretical framework is happening now. You should make your theoretical assumption as explicit as possible. then don't just take what the theory says as a given. Reality is never accurately represented in such a simplistic way. If you imply that it can be, you fundamentally distort a reader's ability to understand the findings that emerge. Giving this, always note the limitations of theoretical framework you've chosen. So here, this will be the writing tips. Okay, borrowing theoretical construct from elsewhere. An increasingly important trend in the social and behavioral science is to think about an attempt to understand research problem from an interdisciplinary perspective. One way to do this is to not rely exclusively on the theories developed within your particular discipline, but to think about how an issue might be informed by theories developed in another discipline. Let's say, for example, if you are a political science student studying the rhetorical strategies used by female incumbents in state legislature campaigns, theories about the use of language could be derived not only from political science, but linguistic, communication studies, philosophy, psychology, and in this particular case, feminist studies. Building theoretical framework based on the postulates and hypotheses developed in many other disciplinary contexts can be both enlightening and an effective way to be more engaged in the research topic. Don't under-theorize. Do not leave the theory hanging out there in the introduction, never to be mentioned again. Under-theorizing weakens your paper. The theoretical framework you describe should guide your study throughout the paper, and be sure to always connect theory to the review of pertinent literature and to explain in the discussion part of your paper how the theoretical framework you choose support analysis of the research problem, or if appropriate, how the theoretical framework was found to be inadequate in explaining the phenomenon you were investigating. In that case, don't be afraid to propose your own theory based on your findings. So what's a theory and what's a hypothesis? The term theory and hypothesis are often used interchangeably in newspaper and popular magazines and in non-academic settings. However, the difference between theory and hypothesis in scholarly research is important, particularly when using an experimental design, because a theory is well-established principle that has been developed to explain some aspect of the natural world. Theories arise from repeated observation and testing and incorporates facts, laws, predictions, and tested assumptions that are widely accepted. Example, the rational choice theory or rational choice theory, grounded theory, critical race theory. A hypothesis, on the other hand, is a specific, testable predictions about what you expect to happen in your study. Let's say, for example, an experiment designed to look at the relationship between study habits and test anxiety might have a hypothesis that states, we predict the student with better study habits will suffer less test anxiety. Unless your study is exploratory in nature, your hypothesis should always explain what you expect to happen during the course of your research. The key distinctions are, again, a theory predicts event in a broad general context, while a hypothesis makes a specific predictions about a specified set of circumstances. A theory has been extensively tested and is generally accepted among scholars. And a hypothesis is a speculative guess that has yet to be tested. Be prepared to challenge the validity of an existing theory. Theories are meant to be tested and their underlying assumptions challenged. They are not rigid or intransigent, but are meant to set forth general principles for explaining phenomena or predicting outcomes. Given this, testing theoretical assumptions is an important way that knowledge in any discipline develops and grows. If you ask to apply an existing theory to a research problem, the analysis may include the expectation by your professor that you should offer modifications to the theory based on your research findings. You must indicate or the indications that theoretical assumptions may need to be modified can include the following. Number one, your findings suggest that the theory does not explain or account for current conditions or circumstances. Number two, the study reveals a finding that is significantly incongruent with the theory attempts to explain a predict. Or your analysis reveals that the theory overly generalized behavior actions without taking into consideration specific factors. So this will be my references. But I just want to show you, the presentation of one of my favorite blogger.
And today we will discuss theoretical framework. And in today's lesson, there are 5 key areas that I'm gonna be highlighting today. First, we have the theory and theoretical framework defined. So we will be defining what a theory is and what a theoretical framework is as well. And also we have the goal of theoretical framework, how to build a theoretical framework, the structure of the theoretical framework, and I will be giving you as well an example of a theoretical framework. And so for this matter, let us discuss first our first key area of our lesson. That would be the theory and theoretical framework defined. So what is meant by a theory and theoretical framework then? If we say theory, it is developed by researchers to explain phenomena, draw connections, and make predictions. And in many cases, to challenge and extend existing knowledge within the limits of critical bounding assumptions. And if we say theoretical framework, it explains the theories that support your research, showing that in your work is grounded in established ideas. Now, what do we mean by this? In other words, your theoretical framework introduces and describes the theory that explains why the research problem under study exists. And aside from that, theoretical framework is also a researcher-made framework in the form of a diagram which explains the scope and range of a concept or construct discussed in combination of 2 or more theories used in the study. And take note that your theoretical framework should appear after the first page of your theoretical background. Again, I would like to reiterate, your theoretical framework should appear after the first page of your theoretical background. Alright, so that ends our first discussion on the first key area of our lesson for today, which is the definition of theory and theoretical framework. And so for that matter, let us now move on to our second key area, and that will be the goal of theoretical framework. So what do you think is the goal of a theoretical framework? Well, the goal of theoretical framework is to present and explain theories and models other researchers have already developed. Now, there may be many different theories about your topic, so the theoretical framework also involves evaluating, comparing, and selecting the most relevant ones. And by framing your research within a clearly defined field, you make the reader aware of the assumptions that inform your approach, showing the rationale behind your choices. So this part of your dissertation or thesis lays the foundations that will support your analysis, helping you interpret your results and make broader generalization. Alright, so the next key area of our lesson, that would be how to build a theoretical framework. Now, in order to do that, we need to strictly follow the 3 steps in creating a theoretical framework, okay? So what is our first step then? Now, the very first step in creating our theoretical framework, that would be to identify your key concepts. What do you mean by identifying your key concepts? Well, the first step is to actually pick out, okay? So we need to pick out the key terms from your problem statement and research questions. Now, concepts often have multiple definitions, correct? Now, so the theoretical framework involves clearly defining what you mean by each term. Now, in order for us to better understand how to identify your key concepts, now let me give you an example. Okay, for example, Company X is struggling with the problem that many online customers do not return to make subsequent purchases. So meaning, there are customers who are purchasing online, but they do not or they no longer go back and make another purchases. And so for that matter, management wants to increase customer loyalty and believes that improved customer satisfaction will play a major role in achieving this goal. Now, to investigate this problem, what we need to do is to identify and plan to focus on the following problem statement, objective, and research question. Okay, so based on our given example, what do you think is our problem here? Okay, based on our example given, our problem is clearly about many online customers do not return to make subsequent purchases, right? So what's the objective of the firm? The objective is to increase customer loyalty. So based on our problem and objective, our research question may be, how can the satisfaction of Company X's online customers be improved in order to increase customer loyalty? So what do you think are our key concepts here then? Well, the concepts of customer loyalty and customer satisfaction as well are clearly central to this particular study. And so for that matter, the theoretical framework will define these concepts and discuss theories about the relationship between them, okay? The second step in creating a theoretical framework that would be to evaluate and explain relevant theories. So we need to select the most important theory or theories related to your key concepts. So by conducting a thorough literature review, we can determine how other researchers have defined and drawn connections between these key concepts which we had identified. So as you write your theoretical framework, what you do is to aim to compare and critically evaluate the approaches that different authors have proposed. Now, after discussing different models and theories, you establish the definitions that best fit your research and then justify why this is the case. So in more complex research projects, you might combine theories from different fields to build your own unique framework. And make sure to mention the most important theory. Again, you need to mention the most important theory, like I said earlier, related to your key concepts. And if there is a well-established theory or model, okay, that you don't want to apply to your own research, then explain why it isn't suitable for your purposes. And finally, the last step in creating a theoretical framework that would be to evaluate and explain related readings. Now, in this area, what we need to do is to review related readings that are related to our study. So if I say related readings, okay, what I mean about this is that I'm referring to the legal basis of our study, which has either direct or indirect implications to the government thrust. So examples of related readings are the different laws or bills or any legislations which are of great relevance, okay, or impact to your study. So examples of these are presidential decrees, we have Republic Act, may it be DepEd order or Department of Education order. We have memorandum circulars, etc. All right? And the next key area that we're going to be discussing now, that would be the structure of the theoretical framework. Now, in a thesis or dissertation, the theoretical framework is sometimes integrated into a literature review chapter, but it can also be included as its own chapter or section. So in our case, our theoretical framework is not integrated in a literature review. Instead, it has a separate section. Now, if your research involves dealing with a lot of complex theories, it's a good idea to include a separate theoretical framework chapter. And finally, the last key area that we're gonna be discussing now, that would be an example of a theoretical framework. So right now, at this point in time, we will now create a theoretical framework. So we will be applying the 3 steps in creating a theoretical framework. Now, before creating our theoretical framework, last time, we discussed statement of the problem, correct? And of course, this was the title that was given as an example. So if you haven't watched the discussion and the statement of the problem, I have included that one in our description box below. So please go to that link first in order for you to better understand what a theoretical framework is, okay? So our title before, that was the impact of parental involvement towards the literacy and numeracy skills of the kindergarten learners. So in order to create our theoretical framework, let us revisit first our steps, okay? So take note that our first step is to identify our key concept. Now, based on our research title given, we have already identified last time our basic key concepts. When I say basic key concepts, I'm referring to the different variables of our study. And what is the difference again between independent and dependent variable? If we say independent variable, this refers to our cause. So in an experiment, this is the variable that is manipulated or controlled by the investigator. On the other hand, if we say dependent variable, this refers to our effect. And in an experiment, it is the variable that the investigator measures to determine the effect of the independent variable. So last time, we had already identified our independent and dependent variables. So we had identified parental involvement as our independent variable or the cause, and literacy and numeracy skills as our independent variables or the effects. For example, why is parental involvement the cause? Because if we ask ourselves, does it necessarily mean that if your parents, okay, are greatly involved with you as your child, as their child rather, then would it mean that you will have a high literacy and numeracy skills? Okay, so these are some of the many considerations that we need to identify for this particular study. So the second step in creating or constructing a theoretical framework, that would be to evaluate and explain relevant theories. And after having evaluated and explained relevant theories, you need to select the most important theory or theories related to your key concepts. So in doing that, so as you can see, this is an example of our theoretical background, okay, or theoretical framework. In my left side, this is where our theory should be located, okay, and connected to your theory is your related readings. And your related readings, like I said earlier, this is gonna be your legal basis, okay? The legal basis of your study, okay? So there should be either direct or indirect implication to the government thrusts, okay? And below that will be the discussion of your independent variable, all right? And connected to your independent variable, that will be the discussions of your dependent variables, just in case you have two dependent variables. And also, finally, connected to that would be your output of your study. So what's your goal? What do you want to do? So you should be defining your output of your study. So in order to apply our format for our theoretical framework, then let me provide you an example based on our research title given. Okay, going back quickly to our title. Our title says the impact of parental involvement towards the literacy and numeracy skills of the kindergarten learners. And take note that our independent variable is the parental involvement, and our dependent variables are the literacy and numeracy skills of the kindergarten learners. So in this case, so since this is gonna be the location of our theory, so I have selected a sample theory that is, okay, the theory that I have selected is 6 propositions of a social theory of numeracy, interpreting an influential theory of literacy. So this is by Craig Jeffrey and Guzman Lynette, 2018. And secondly, connected to your theory is your legal basis of your study. So in this case, the legal basis that I have selected for my study, that would be the DepEd Order 18, series of 2017, which states guidelines on the utilization of the 2017 Every Child a Reader program funds for the early language, literacy, and numeracy program professional development component. All right, so this is where my theory is located. Connected to that is my legal basis. And the third one is below my theory and legal basis, that would be my independent variable. And take note, the independent variable that we have identified is parental involvement. And below your independent variable are your two dependent variables. Okay, so we have dependent variable number 1 and dependent variable number 2. So in that case, so below our independent variables, we have the dependent variable number 1, which is literacy skills, and our second dependent variable is the numeracy skill. And finally, the last part of our framework, that would be the output. What do we want to do? Okay, so what is our goal? So in this case, our goal or output, that would be a proposed literacy and numeracy skills enhancement plan. And so we would be able to augment the literacy and numeracy skills of our kindergarten learners. So this is our main goal of our study. All right, so this is how you create a theoretical framework. All right, so I think that ends our discussion for today. If you have questions, please let me know in the comment section below. And if you like this video, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell button.
Okay, so I think that's it, and this will be our references. So thank you and good day, everyone. Godspeed. Keep safe.